I sat down recently with an old friend who is, by every societal metric, the picture of success. He has the high-pressure career, the luxury mortgage, and the reputation of being the guy who gets it done. But as he sat across from me, picking at his food, he looked physically gray. He spent 20 minutes describing his reality. The chronic insomnia, the chest pains he ignores, and the sheer dread he feels every Sunday night. He described his life not as a journey, but as a machine he had to keep oiling, even if it crushed him. But then the conversation took a jarring turn. I simply asked him, if it hurts this much, why not just walk away and find what makes you happy? The shift was instantaneous. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a sharp defensive anger. He literally recoiled, as if I'd suggested he jump off a cliff. He started aggressively listing his obligations, the bills, the status, the expectations, and dropped this chilling line. You don't get to just be happy. That's not how the real world works. This is the price of admission. It was a stunning moment of cognitive dissonance. Here was a man voluntarily dying by inches, yet he was furiously defending the very weapon killing him. It revealed a terrifying truth. What he called responsibility was actually a sophisticated prison of fear. He wasn't driving his life, he was being driven by a program that convinced him his own soul was secondary to the machine. And he is not alone. Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to dive deep into that terrifying, stunning moment.
Right.
The moment when responsibility becomes a sophisticated prison of fear, and the self is secondary to the machine.
Exactly.
We are exploring this whole concept of responsibility without sovereignty and the urgent path back to what you might call intrinsic self-authorship. This deep dive is really about understanding why so many of us feel compelled to pay this price of admission that costs us our own life force.
And how the systems around us, the economic systems, and even our own, our own cognitive processes, they kind of collude to keep us paying it. What you described with your friend, it's profoundly relatable, but it's so much more than just a personal crisis.
It feels bigger.
It is bigger. That feeling of being a disposable cog in some vast, cold machine, it mirrors this global challenge that thinkers are now calling the meta-crisis.
The meta-crisis.
Yeah, and it's not just one problem, it's not just climate change or political instability or technology moving too fast.
That's all of it.
It's a whole cluster of these intertwined societal, economic, and psychological failures that all stem from the same root cause.
So you have to look deeper.
We have to. We need to look past the surface level stress and really examine the economic forces that systematically reward powerlessness.
And the mental habits that keep us compliant.
Yeah.
That keep us defending the very cage we're in.
Exactly. We have to investigate how the external structures of our economy and the internal structures of our minds are almost designed to suppress that self-authorship, that intrinsic joy, and lock us into this pattern, this responsibility without sovereignty.
That line my friend said, this is the price of admission. I mean, it just made me realize how perfectly the system reflects that internal state of fear.
It does.
Our research brought up this anecdote about a man. Let's call him Julian. He's a 34-year-old strategy consultant in New York.
Right.
And on paper, I mean, this guy was winning. 7-figure salary, huge prestige, all the responsibility in the world managing these major client portfolios.
The complete picture of success.
The complete picture. But his story was, it was like a clinical dissection of functional paralysis. He described staring at a spreadsheet at 11 p.m.
We've all been there.
Polishing a slide deck for a client who, let's be honest, probably wasn't even going to read it. He called the feeling a hollow gravity.
Hollow gravity, wow.
A physical weight on his chest that wasn't just being tired, but the realization that his life was defined by the anxiety of losing status, not the joy of building anything real.
He was a machine that forgot it was alive.
A highly efficient one.
And Julian's experience, it really it illustrates the core conflict between our economic model and what we actually need psychologically as human beings.
Right.
We're living in an era, you could call it late-stage capitalism, that is just relentlessly focused on profit, on fierce competition.
Radical individualism, self-interest.
Exactly. And this whole environment, it fosters this overwhelmingly extrinsic orientation in all of us.
I think we need to stay on that for a second, that difference between extrinsic and intrinsic.
It's crucial.
So when we say extrinsic goals, we're talking about wealth, power, status, possessions.
Right. Things that rely on someone else's validation or some external measurement.
This is the key, right? These external goals, they don't just exist alongside the internal ones. They
crowd them out. They systematically devalue and push out the intrinsic goals.
Which are what? Things like personal growth,
Meaningful affiliation, self-acceptance, community, the things that actually make life feel worthwhile and resonant.
But they don't produce a measurable asset. You can't put them on a quarterly report or post them on social media.
Precisely. They are valued for being, not for having.
And if the whole system is built to reward the extrinsic,
then it's actively undermining the very things we need for well-being.
Exactly.
I mean, if you look at self-determination theory, which is this globally recognized psychological framework, there are 4 core psychological needs. They are absolutely essential.
And if you neglect them,
you will suffer. Doesn't matter how big your bank account is, you will suffer.
So what are they?
The first is security, just basic survival confidence, knowing the ground isn't going to vanish under your feet.
Okay.
The second is autonomy, feeling independent, self-regulated, able to resist that social pressure to just conform.
The third?
Competence, a sense of mastery, of effectiveness, of positive self-regard in what you do. And finally, relatedness.
Connection.
The hardwired, innate desire for warm, satisfying contact with others, that feeling of belonging.
So this extrinsic trap is like a targeted toxin against these 4 needs. Let's break that down.
Okay.
If your job security is always threatened by disruption or restructuring, which the system needs to grow, right?
Yeah.
You lose security.
This foundation is always shaking, yes.
And if you're constantly bombarded by marketing telling you your self-worth depends on what you own.
You sacrifice autonomy. Your choices aren't your own anymore. They're regulated by the market's demands. And the system confuses this extreme individualism with freedom. Well, the reality is that the huge decisions shaping our society are made by a tiny minority who hold the wealth. They don't have to work to survive.
So the rest of us get the illusion of choice.
While being under constant pressure to conform.
And the need for competence gets twisted too, doesn't it?
It does. If you're always chasing external status compared to others, that's not real competence. That's not mastery.
It's a zero-sum game.
It's a zero-sum game that just breeds constant rivalry, anxiety, and social comparison. You're measuring your worth against an endless stream of other people's highlight reels.
And that rivalry is toxic because it just destroys relatedness.
Absolutely. The philosopher Erich Fromm, he described this shift perfectly. He said we live less in the being mode, focusing on experience, growth, connection, and more in the having mode.
Possessions, control, external validation.
Right. And this isn't just a theory. Study after study shows that as people place more importance on these extrinsic material goals, their well-being goes down. And at the same time, they place less importance on self-direction, social justice, being supportive.
The system structurally rewards us for being isolated and competitive.
Over collaboration and inner fulfillment, yes.
The catastrophe for Julian was that without the external validation from his job, he had no idea who Julian even was.
His identity was outsourced.
Completely. And that leads us right into how the system turns that conflict into what we all call burnout.
That is a crucial connection. Because burnout has been so dangerously simplified, we just think it means overwork.
But it's not.
Our deep dive suggests it's a much deeper crisis of meaning. The way we experience burnout today is it's a state of mental fullness coupled with emotional emptiness.
You're exhausted, but you can't rest.
Exactly. You're stuck in a chronic state of arousal.
That phrase, chronic arousal, that's the key. I think we all have that 10 p.m. moment where we realize we're just polishing a coffin, not building a temple. So how do we tell the difference between real responsibility and that fear-driven performance? And how does that fear actually, physically show up?
It shows up as that chronic state of being perpetually on alert. And that's the neurobiological cost of the extrinsic trap.
What does it do to the brain?
It disrupts the functions of your prefrontal cortex, the part you need for planning, for emotional regulation, for making good decisions.
So it's constantly flooded with stress hormone.
Right. And that weakens your focus, your decision-making. The result is that mental paralysis you mentioned.
My mind won't stop, but I can't do anything.
Exactly. The mind is just spinning, analyzing, planning. It's full, but it can't translate any of that noise into effective, meaningful action. It's just mental white noise.
So it's not that we're thinking too much, it's that we're thinking in this panic-driven way.
Yes. Where even rest feels like just another task on the to-do list.
Which completely defeats the purpose of rest.
Right. And this type of fatigue, that mental fullness and emotional emptiness, it's often directly connected to the meaning crisis. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist, he identified the existential vacuum.
Which is what?
It's when people fail to find meaning in what they're doing and their inner energy just collapses. Academic burnout, for instance, often comes not just from the long hour.
But from believing that what I am doing is worthless.
Or my contribution is invisible. Yes.
That makes so much sense in our economy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That supply chains are so long, specialization is so intense, it's almost impossible to see the real value of that 11 p.m. spreadsheet.
Your work becomes abstracted to the point of meaninglessness.
Right.
And the paradox is that everyone is always desperately busy, but the busyness doesn't produce fulfillment, it produces emptiness.
And social media just amplifies this.
Completely. Productivity itself becomes an external identity, not an intrinsic practice. Self-improvement isn't for you anymore, it's for external approval.
You're not self-actualizing, you're
self-consuming.
self-consumption.
Yeah.
That's a powerful term. It's like you said, a spiritual cannibalism where you eat your own soul just to feed the approval machine.
And the compulsion to act, driven by that fear of failure, it creates this endless loop, effort without satisfaction.
And when that happens over and over,
People develop learned helplessness. Even if I try, it's no use. The paralysis that follows is actually a defense mechanism. The mind is trying to shield itself from being depleted any further.
but tragically, it results in the complete loss of sovereignty.
Right. And we have to recognize overcoming this isn't about working harder. It's about cultivating the wisdom to think more gently and to decisively reorient away from that whole approval economy.
Okay, so if the extrinsic trap is the cage, we need to understand the internal mechanism, the key that locks our minds into compliance.
Right. Why are we so vulnerable to it?
And the answer seems to lie in how our brains actually process reality.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the profound work of Ian McGilchrist.
McGilchrist's work is, it's indispensable for understanding this. He defines two fundamental modes of attention through the brain's hemispheres.
The left and right hemispheres.
So the left hemisphere, or LH, is the emissary. It's specialized for narrow, targeted, precise attention.
It isolates things.
It isolates objects, it grasps them, it abstracts them into concepts, categorizes them, and it focuses intensely on utility and power. Crucially, the LH provides the map.
The map. So a representation of reality.
A very useful but decontextualized representation of reality.
So the emissary is kind of like the bureaucrat, the specialist, the part of the brain that's always asking, what is this thing useful for?
That's a great analogy. And then the right hemisphere, the RH, is the master.
The master.
The master is focused on broad, vigilant, sustained attention. It sees the world in its seamless flow. It's focused on presence, on context, on implicit meaning.
It's in touch with the experience itself.
It is the experience. It is the actual territory, not the map. The RH sees the unique living thing. The LH sees the category it belongs in and how you can use it.
And this is where the big philosophical error happens, isn't it?
This is it.
The left hemisphere is amazing at managing details and providing utility. But the crisis comes from the dominance of the emissary, the map maker.
Who has convinced itself that it is the master, that it is the territory itself.
But the map is not the territory.
It's not. The emissary's primary value is utility, which the philosopher Max Scheler put at the very lowest level in his hierarchy of values.
The lowest level.
So when utility becomes the main driving force of a civilization, when everything has to serve a purpose, we systematically prioritize mastery and control over true wisdom.
We start valuing things only for what they can do for us.
For how they serve the mechanism, rather than for their inherent intrinsic value.
And what are those intrinsic values that the left hemisphere just struggles to get?
The right hemisphere, the master, that's the one that recognizes and grasps these higher values. McGilchrist calls them agathistic values.
Meaning they exist on their own.
They exist independently of any instrumental use. Things like beauty, goodness, truth, and the sacred.
Like a piece of music or a dance.
Exactly. They are valued for their own sake. If you ask the left hemisphere, what's the utility of playing the piano beautifully? It struggles, unless the answer is to make money or to gain status.
But the right hemisphere understands the value is in the performance itself.
It's self-purposeful.
This immediately makes me think of that analogy of Elena the pianist.
Yes.
She was trained to technical perfection.
Oh.
Pure left hemisphere dominance. Flawlessly playing the notes, the map, but she felt nothing.
Her turning point came when she stopped trying to perform the music and started trying to inhabit it.
She was trying to shift her mode of knowing.
She moved away from what we call propositional compliance, just checking the notes, the map, to what John Vervaeke's framework calls participatory flow.
And that's the neurological shift towards sovereignty.
She wasn't playing for applause anymore. She was playing because the music demanded to exist through her. She was walking the territory, not just reading the map.
Elena's struggle, it really highlights this massive fragmentation in how we know things. We tend to focus almost exclusively on facts and skills.
Right.
But that leaves out these whole other crucial dimensions of understanding that are essential for meaning.
Vervaeke's taxonomy of the 4 kinds of knowing is so helpful here. It shows what our culture has fragmented by prioritizing the emissary's view.
Okay, so what are the 4?
The first is propositional knowing. This is your beliefs, your facts. It's judged by truth. It's the abstract textbook stuff.
Got it.
Second is procedural knowing. This is your skills, your know-how. Just by power or empowerment. It's knowing how to do something, like drive a car.
So facts and skills, that's what we focus on.
Almost exclusively. But then there's perspectival knowing. This is about your state of consciousness, your situational awareness. It's judged by presence.
Being in the moment.
And how well your state of mind actually fits the situation you're in. And the last one is the deepest and the hardest for the emissary to get. It's participatory knowing.
What does that mean?
It's the agent-arena co-identification, judged by belonging or fitness. It's the way your character, your very biology, is shaped to fit an environment and how you shape it back.
Like a master carpenter who just knows the wood.
Exactly. The line between the carpenter and the craft starts to dissolve.
It's so clear that we prioritize propositional and procedural knowing in, school and business.
Meta and capability.
Right. But the irony is profound. We have all the facts about climate change. That's propositional. We have the technology to fix it. Procedural.
Yet we lack the shared presence, the situational awareness, the character.
The perspectival and participatory knowing to actually do something about it.
And the crisis of meaning is precisely that fragmentation. We think the solution is just to find a purpose.
Yeah.
But purpose, the utilitarian goal, that's only one piece.
Meaning needs more.
A much richer architecture. It needs coherence. The world has to make sense. It needs significance, access to the really real, something higher than the ego, and it needs mattering.
Feeling connected to something beyond yourself.
Beyond your isolated existence, yes.
That explains why so many people retreat into virtual worlds, doesn't it?
The video game analogy is perfect here.
A video game gives you a perfectly coherent story. A clear purpose, intelligible rules.
It gives you significance. You can level up, transcend your current state. And it gives you that flow state, that feeling of mattering that's often missing from your real-world job.
So you're trading the messy real world for a manufactured one that provides those elements of meaning.
But the crisis comes when we uncouple these 4 kinds of knowing in the real world. We end up with these shallow attempts at fulfillment.
Like what?
Like spiritual bypassing, where people chase altered states of consciousness, that feeling of perspectival knowing, without cultivating the altered traits of character, which is participatory knowing.
They want the feeling of wisdom without the hard work of transformation.
Exactly.
So the inner cage is built when the left hemisphere, the emissary, convinces us the map is the territory.
That utility is the highest value.
And that facts are the only knowledge that counts.
Right. And when we operate only on that level, we are neurologically incapable of experiencing the higher values, the sacred, the meaningful.
Because that requires the master's holistic perspective.
So we become masters of control, but we're slaves to our own mechanism. And while those cognitive structures keep us compliant, we have to look at the outer structures that leverage this.
Right.
The economic system we're in isn't static. It has to be perpetually disruptive and destructive to maintain its competitive edge.
To create new needs, new desires, to spur growth.
But this has catastrophic social and psychological costs for the individual.
We see that cost everywhere, right? Extreme financial insecurity, precarity.
Technological unemployment, the gig economy, short-term contracts.
The constant stress of long, unpredictable hours, which we know is linked to poor health, to heart disease.
That structural insecurity is the lever the system uses to maintain control. It ensures that the wealth of the few relies directly on the exploitation of the many.
The numbers are staggering.
They are. About 2,000 global billionaires hold as much wealth as the bottom 4.6 billion people.
That's 60% of the world's population?
And this extreme inequality isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. It's a mathematical necessity for the system to work this way. For a minority to have that much, the rest have to have just enough precarity to keep running.
And this extraction goes way beyond just natural resources like land or water.
Oh, absolutely. It extends to human data, human labor, extracting value without fair compensation, without any regard for mental or physical health.
And the pursuit of individual success that the model pushes actually encourages rivalry.
Intrinsically unproductive zero-sum games, where your gain depends on someone else's loss, further destroying that need for relatedness.
It's a self-reinforcing loop then.
Completely. The system promotes materialism by constantly creating anxiety and insecurity that buying things can never actually fix.
The anxiety serves the market.
But it systematically damages our well-being.
Yeah.
Even the rich who are conspicuously consuming, they aren't truly fulfilled because of the perpetual social comparison.
The goalposts are always moving.
Always. Rising incomes don't translate to rising happiness once your basic needs are met, because the market keeps moving the goalposts.
So the system weaponizes our need for security and competence, making sure true intrinsic fulfillment is always just out of reach.
Forcing us to keep performing.
To keep paying that price of admission. Okay, so let's look at how this plays out for marginalized groups. This brings us to Hannah Arendt's framework.
Arendt's distinction between labor, work, and action is such a powerful lens for this. Our research looked at the experience of LGBTIQ plus migrant interpreters working under temporary contracts.
Okay, so despite their high professional status, their intersectional identity makes them really vulnerable to this structural extraction.
Extremely.
We need to make sure those three categories, labor, work, action, are crystal clear here. They seem key to understanding this loss of power.
Okay, so for Arendt's, labor is the cyclical, repetitive survival stuff. It's never-ending maintenance for just biological existence.
Got it.
Work is about creating stability, durable things in the world, building a house, writing a law, establishing a stable career.
And action.
That's political engagement, collective voice, advocacy. It's where individuals in a shared public space assert their agency to transform their conditions.
Okay, so how does the system, acting as the emissary, force these interpreters out of action?
It forces an overwhelming amount of their energy into labor. Think of what we can call the minority tax.
The administrative, emotional, and safety burdens they carry.
Exactly. The daily unacknowledged burden of correcting microaggressions, anticipating misgendering, constantly having to secure safe assignments.
Especially if they're being sent to countries where their identity is criminalized.
These are repetitive survival tasks that are not compensated, not recognized as work, not counted as political acts. They're just cyclical, draining maintenance that diverts immense energy.
So their ability to engage in work is constantly being undermined too.
Right. They're managing bureaucratic messes related to their identity or migration status. The temporary nature of their contracts stops them from building professional continuity.
Or stable careers.
And this institutional design, which is often shaped by neoliberal labor policies, it actively erodes the collective space for action.
How does it do that?
The system relies heavily on temporary contracts and things like remote interpreting. Now, RI can offer some immediate physical safety.
Because they don't have to travel to dangerous places.
But it has a devastating side effect. It makes them more isolated.
Because the isolation just fragments their professional networks.
Yes.
They lose the informal, in-person stuff, the coffee breaks, the hallway conversations that were so vital for finding allies, for discussing shared problems.
For collectively negotiating wages or structural changes.
And the system exploits that isolation.
It does. The increased individualization makes collective bargaining almost impossible. The institutions act as a deflection mechanism.
So the entire minority tax, the emotional, the administrative, the safety burdens from systemic inequality, it all gets individualized.
Responsibility for dealing with it is deflected onto the marginalized person, increasing their precarity and forcing their attention right back down to basic survival, back to labor.
So the individual can only endure their conditions, they can't transform them.
Because the system ensures they never have the time, the energy, or the collective space for action. And this isn't a flaw, it's an intentional consequence of policies that put institutional flexibility over worker protection and democratic agency.
We've mapped the trap pretty thoroughly now. The external pressure, the cognitive imbalance that values the map over the territory, the structural enforcement of precarity.
The denial of collective action.
So the question is, how do we escape this cycle of responsibility without sovereignty? The antidote our deep dive points to is a concept called insourcing.
Insourcing. It is the complete, decisive reversal of power outsourcing.
What does that mean in practice?
It means recognizing at the deepest level that security, peace, and purpose are inherent to your being. They are untouchable.
They're not external things you have to acquire, earn, or beg for from the machine.
Exactly.
It sounds like the moment the emissary finally says no to the endless demands of the outside world.
But not out of fatigue or resentment.
Out of reverence for the self, for the master.
That's it. Sovereignty is the transition from always asking that fear-driven question, what should I do? Which is rooted in the map.
To recognizing what I actually am.
And letting action arise from that recognition, that decisive, fearless move. That's the roar.
The roar.
The fearless assertion of your boundaries and your intrinsic truth. And this shift isn't just personal empowerment, it's the practical application of moving from just interpreting the world to directly knowing it through experience.
I think the real-world example of this is that community garden anecdote. It's a perfect illustration of what happens when intrinsic joy meets rigid bureaucracy.
Tell us about Marcus and the UK community garden.
Right, so the local bureaucracy had this rigid plan for revitalization. It was all based on efficiency models, zoning laws, external control.
Pure emissary logic.
And Marcus and his neighbors, they were just fed up with the neglect, so they just ignored the rules.
They just started a community garden based on radical trust and intrinsic joy with no formal planning, no permission.
And when self-sovereignty meets rigid bureaucracy, the system that's designed to manage fear and compliance, it glitches.
It absolutely glitches. The neighbors, acting from intrinsic motivation, not obedience, they spontaneously created this dense network of ethical care.
And the official system predicted chaos.
Vandalism, failure, because it couldn't compute behavior that wasn't driven by utility. Instead, the garden flourished. Crime rates dropped in that little area. Community well-being shot up.
It achieved better results than any centralized plan could have.
And when the authorities finally came to potentially bulldoze it, they weren't met with an angry mob. They were met with peaceful, happy people simply living their truth. The community's lack of fear just neutralized the bureaucratic mechanism.
That suggests that a widespread adoption of this kind of sovereignty could actually start to cure the meta crisis.
Yeah.
But how do you scale that?
Right.
It feels like we need a deep systemic shift to make that individual realization stick.
We have to realize that the meta crisis is fundamentally an educational crisis.
An educational crisis.
Zachary Stein defines the ancient Greek term paideia as education that acts as the deep code of society. It's the way a culture maintains, renews, and transforms itself.
So education in this sense comes before politics, before civilization itself.
Any change in our collective paideia is far more radical and transformative than any political revolution.
And we are currently stuck in this piecemeal educational approach. The focus is on STEM, job preparedness, measurable output.
Which only addresses the capability crisis, how to produce efficient workers. We call it human capital theory.
But that's only one of 4 crises.
Right. The meta crisis has 4 interwoven parts. There's sense-making confusion. There's meaning. The existential vacuum. There's capability, not being able to do the jobs, and legitimacy loss of faith in institutions.
And just focusing on capability is self-defeating.
If we train brilliant, technically capable specialists but fail to give them any sense of significance or meaning, their immense power is often directed toward destructive ends or just meaningless bureaucracy.
So a viable future needs a radical integral shift that addresses all 4 at once.
Exactly.
So we need to cultivate wisdom, not just mechanized knowledge. The goal isn't to fill students with more data, more propositional knowing.
But to teach them how to know and why they should care.
We have to go back to the analogy of the gardener.
Wisdom can't be compelled or mechanized. It has to be cultivated. We have to create the structural and cognitive circumstances for it to flourish.
Which means structurally undoing the, what was the phrase? The hypertrophy of the left hemisphere's dominance.
Yes, that's a strong phrase.
Can we translate that medical metaphor for you listening?
It just means the left hemisphere, the emissary, the part that craves control, abstraction, utility, it has become pathologically overgrown.
It's crowding out the master's perspective, the source of context, meaning wisdom.
And this overgrown emissary shows up externally as excessive bureaucracy. So the first practical step is to eliminate the parasite of excessive administration in our schools, our universities, our hospitals.
This bureaucracy is the externalized drive for control.
It's the very mechanism that drains resources, creates meaninglessness, and stifles any authentic relationship.
It's the sheer administrative weight that everyone complains about, whether you're a doctor or a teacher or a charity worker.
And second, we have to fundamentally reimagine teaching to focus on relationality, on creative, empathic understanding.
Not just procedural learning or memorizing facts.
Which means moving away from intense hyper-specialization and bringing back the value of overseeing the whole picture, the master's broad, contextual right hemisphere view.
Because a specialist knows everything about a tiny domain,
but lacks the wisdom to integrate that knowledge ethically into the broader human experience.
And this cultivation of wisdom needs to happen across society, not just in schools.
We need to see our institutions as a living, integrated system. Historically, civilization maintained a balance. You had the university for propositional knowledge,
The monastery or sage traditions for wisdom, for perspectival and participatory knowing.
and the community or church for life application and ethical practice. And they were all interconnected in what's called an opponent-processing relationship.
So they were designed to check each other's biases. The university's dry facts were balanced by the monastery's depth of character.
And both were tested by the community's practical needs.
Yes.
Each institution prevented the others from becoming pathologically dominant.
And the challenge now is to reintegrate those roles.
To find new institutional structures that can foster that relationship again, instead of letting them become isolated or adversarial or, as is often the case today, letting the university and the hospital be swallowed whole by the bureaucratic logic of the market.
Ultimately, this path forward requires shifting our view of success from extrinsic purpose, which is finite,
To intrinsic value, which is infinite. We have to shift from finite games
which have a clear, achievable end state, like getting rich or finishing a project.
to infinite games, which have value in being performed eternally, like love, music, truth, or raising a child with character.
These infinite games are intrinsically valuable. You play them for the sake of continuing the game, not for winning it.
Right.
So the development of wisdom really means guiding the left hemisphere, the utility-driven part, to recognize its own limits.
And to develop a genuine reverence for the master, the right hemisphere.
That sounds like a profoundly Socratic project.
It is. Using the tools of logic and analysis, the emissary, to recognize what is beautiful, good, and true, which always lies beyond the self and its immediate calculations.
And the ultimate dignity and hope in our existence lies in this idea that we're not passive. We're not just inhabitants of a fixed universe.
We have choice, and inherent in that choice is an ennobling obligation.
But an obligation that isn't imposed from the outside by fear or rules.
It arises from the recognition that the ground of being is beautiful, rich, responsive, and it needs our conscious response.
We're being invited to participate in the ongoing evolution of the cosmos just by focusing on our internal state.
The transformative power lies in focusing our attention on fostering wisdom, by cultivating the conditions for the sacred to emerge. By valuing goodness, truth, and beauty, we enable new ways of bringing the immanent and the transcendent into relation.
And it's that relational capacity that can ultimately steward the immense power of our technology and define a viable, meaningful civilization.
The stakes they're immense, because the ultimate success of civilization depends entirely on shifting from a society held together by fear and compliance to one bound by shared purpose, intrinsic value, and the cultivation of collective wisdom.
We have to stop closing down to certainty.
Which is the left hemisphere's comfortable but toxic trap, and open up completely to possibility, embracing the vulnerability and depth required to achieve truly great things.
That choice, that transition, that is the roar of insourcing. It's the realization that the life force flowing through you is untouched by spreadsheets and quarterly reports, and that the responsibilities that once felt like unbreakable chains are actually just choices. Choices you make based on who you choose to be, not what you are compelled to do. When you truly see that the external system relies fundamentally on your fear of loss, you reclaim your absolute untouchable agency. The lion of sovereignty is already within you, waiting for you to stop whispering and roar.